Is that okay? Pravinji, is it okay? And Rajendraji, shall we start the session?
Yes, please. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Hello and namaste, everyone. I'm Dr. Neera Shrestha Pradhan, Program Coordinator, Koshi Basin Initiative, and Senior Water and Adaptation Specialist at ECMODE. Today, we are going to start the training on managing sedimentation risk in hydropower projects, application of reservoir conservation model. So this is a 3-day program, and we would like to thank you all for registering to this training program. As Vishnuji just mentioned, we would like to request you to participate and in the entire 3-day program, so that based on this, we are also going to distribute the certificate towards the end after this training program. So this training program is organized by Koshi Disaster Risk Reduction Knowledge Hub. We call it KDKH. We have 8 transboundary working groups in this KDKH, and Hydropower Transboundary Working Group is one of them. So this training program is being organized by the Transboundary Working Group on Hydropower under the KDKH. KDKH is actually a transboundary knowledge network in the Koshi Basin countries, especially with an objective to work on different disasters that occur in the Koshi Basin, and also measures to address them. It is more of a transboundary network, as you know, but this is purely a political network where we talk about science and evidence-based knowledge. KDKH is being led in Nepal by the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority, NDRRMA. In India, it is being led by the Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, BSDMA in India, and in China, Institute of Mountain Hazards and Environment, IMHE. And ECMODE is the secretariat of KDKH. The Transboundary Working Group on Hydropower is led by the Center for Water Resources Studies, Institute of Engineering, and Professor Dr. Vishnu Pandey is here with us, leading the entire team. It is co-led by Dr. Sunita Chowdhury, who is the ecosystem specialist at ECMODE. And the Hydropower Transboundary Working Group is supported by the World Bank. So this training program is a part of the World Bank support program. So with this, without much ado, I would like to go towards the opening remarks. And while doing so, I would like to request my colleague Shivang to please put the KDKH website on the chat box, so that those who want to go into detail about KDKH can visit our website and also join the team. So for the opening remarks, I would like to first request Mr. Rajendra Sharma, Under Secretary Technical from NDRRMA. Rajendraji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all. First of all, on behalf of NDRRMA, I would like to thank you all, the organizers, the resource persons, and the participants for making this event happen. We all know that the sustainable hydropower development is one of our priorities for Nepal for alleviating energy poverty and fostering economic growth while conserving river ecosystem systems. However, given young and fragile geology of Nepal's Himalaya, hydropower development usually encounters with variety of risks related to disaster. Towards our long-term goal of sustainable hydropower development for the country, we have been actively engaged in science, evidence-based decision-making, and capacity building of stakeholders with the objective of sharing science practice and experience, and hence strengthen our capacity to deal with those risks. Hydropower Transboundary Working Group, TWG, was initiated as a part of KOSI Disaster Risk Management and Knowledge Hub. This TWG aims to organize regularly training programs, webinars, and share various learning resources. This is the second training organized by the TWG after the first one held during 30 May to 1st June 2022 on the theme. At that time, the theme was application of global hydrometeorological monitoring and forecasting information system for disaster risk reduction management in hydropower. This training will focus on managing sediment risks in hydropower projects with the application of RESCON 2 model, RESCON 2 model. As sedimentation is a key issue in hydropower project, I believe this training will strengthen capacity from Nepal and the region for managing sediment-related risks in hydropower projects. Finally, I highly appreciate sincere efforts of Center for Water Resource Studies, CWRS, at Institute of Engineering, Tiruvana University in Nepal, ICIMOD, and the World Bank for pulling the resource together to make this event happen. Similarly, I'd like to thank the resource persons for this training program and all the participants, and I wish for the success of the training program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajendra ji, for highlighting the importance of sediment management, especially in the hydropower projects. And in this region, hydropower projects being important, I think this training program will certainly highlight. And as you have said, for informed decision-making and science-based decision-making, I think this training program will certainly help all of us. Now, to move forward, I would like to request Mr. Pravin Karki, the global lead hydropower dams from the World Bank, for your remarks. Pravinji, over to you.
Thank you so much, Neeraji. First of all, huge thanks to Nikos, Neeraji, Professor Vishnu Pandeyji, Pratimaji, and all others who worked to bring this training to you today. I'd just like to say that sediment trapping by reservoirs and the associated storage loss, it's a huge concern and of primary global importance. It has significant consequences both for downstream and for the sustainability of reservoirs and associated reduction in the reliability of future water and power supplies. And for Nepal, it's an extremely important topic because of our geology, our topography, etc. Now, there is an increasing awareness of the challenges and increasing determination to address this issue. So we at the World Bank received funding from the Austrian government to support a 2-year global study in sediment management in reservoirs and run-of-the-river projects. The objective was to improve the global practitioners' understanding of problems related to sedimentation and to support the planning and operation of sustainable sediment management. So in cooperation with existing activities of international organizations and operating companies, we focused on basically a few activities. This project was successfully closed. And as a result of that, we have a very rich plethora of tools and documents. First of all, we have a international hydropower association hosting case studies from different countries on reservoir sedimentation management. A technical toolkit consisting of design guidelines and technical analysis tools were developed. You will hear about RESCON 2 today from Nikos. We also developed practical policy guidelines aimed at identifying specific policy, economic, legal and regulatory initiatives at the project level and basin scale. And we work quite a lot on seminars, conferences, and training programs, even during COVID. So the global sediment management study comprised these 5 activities and was for a total of 2 to 3 years duration. And the project basically conveys the message of sustainable sediment management and displays the major concepts, its long-term benefits, available technical strategies for implementation, requirements for success, including monitoring and suggested policy directions. I'm very pleased that Nikos today could deliver this training to you. He's been really the manager of this project at the World Bank, and he is the principal author of RESCON 2, building upon the earlier version, which he will tell you about. And with a team of international experts, he successfully developed the RESCON 2 model. So thanks again, and I wish you a very successful training program. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a tough one. So please listen with all your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pravinji, for your kind words. And then also, we would also like to thank, on behalf of KDKH, we would like to thank the World Bank for helping us to establish this transboundary working group on hydropower. With this, to move forward, we were supposed to have Dr. Arun Bhaktashrestha, the regional program manager from EC Mode, but because of his prior engagements, he is not able to join us today for this opening session, but he has promised that he will be with us on the closing session. With this, I don't want to take much of the time. So moving ahead, Bishnuji, before I hand over to you, I would like to request everyone, if you feel comfortable, to please open your video. We would like to take a group photo, and then I would like to hand over to Bishnuji. Shivang and Sunita, if you are ready, let us know. So I would like to request you to take the group photo. Yes, everyone, request you, if you are comfortable, to put your video on.
Yeah, requesting everyone to have a big smile, and it would take us a couple of minutes because there are multiple screens. So please smile now.
Yeah, just wait, Sivang. I don't see Vishnuji.
Vishnuji.
Oh, really? I'm here.
I can see.
Here,
so
here,
there are
here.
multiple screens, Sunita, so maybe. Yeah.
Yes, some people, they still have not turned on their camera, so I just request them to turn on the cameras, please.
I thought not smile, but you said not.
That is fine, Shivang. Maybe they do not feel comfortable to put their camera on.
Okay, so it's done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shivang. Maybe you can share it on the chat box later. Now, with this, I would like to request Professor Dr. Vishnu Prasad Pandey, lead KDKH Transboundary Working Group on Hydropower, and is from the Center for Water Resources Studies, Institute of Engineering. Vishnuji, over to you, and I would like to request you to take this training program forward with the objective of the training, and would also like to request you to introduce our resource person today and facilitate the training further. Over to you, Vishnuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Neera Pradhanji. I'm really pleased to welcome you all once more time for this important training session. Like outlined earlier by Dr. Neera, Mr. Praveen Karki, and also Mr. Rajendra Sharma, these kind of training programs are kind of regular activities of the Hydropower Transboundary Working Group under KDKH. This is second in the series, like outlined earlier, and this one will focus on managing sedimentation risk in hydropower projects, application of RESCON 2 model. Most of our trainings would focus on some or more aspects of hydropower and especially disaster risk management, and therefore this is also focused accordingly. This is the 3 days event, a total of 9 hours as indicated earlier. There were over 160 participants who registered for the training program. Most of our training programs have the good number of registration like this one. given the large number of interest and also kind agreement of our resource person, we are considering to divide it into 2 episodes. This is the first episode during 25 to 27 September, and the second episode would be sometime in November. And those who are not considered for this session will be considered for that session, and we have informed accordingly. The date for the second session will be announced in due course. Also, we have what we love to do is the diversity of the participants. So in terms of the selection for the first one, we also thought of the diversity in country. We have participants from most of the South Asian countries and also the other countries who are either Nepali or non-Nepali, either as students or researchers or professionals working outside. We have diversity in country, gender, and age groups in this particular session. So our 3 days program will focus day 1 on sedimentation issues in a hydropower project and introduction or demonstration of RESCON 2 model. Day 2 will focus on hands-on on storage reservoir case studies. And day 3 will focus on hands-on on peaking ROR case study. And also in the day 3, we will request all of you to provide feedback on the training. For that, we will announce on the day 3 itself by filling some of the online forms. And we'll have a certificate distribution program. But unfortunately, we will not have all the certificate ready on that day, but we will have a sample ready. And in the post-training, we'll reach out to all of you with the ready, when the certificate is ready, which you can download from some of the server later on. So the objective is to make you kind of aware and also to make you comfortable with the tool RESCON 2 so that you can apply in your professional research setting later on. So our focus would be on hands-on, which also will be described later by our resource person. We also hope that you have followed the pre-session guidance note, which we provided you, I think 1 or 2 days earlier. So in which we have provided the materials through a temporary link, which will expire shortly. So in case if you had not done earlier, please download them shortly and also install the RESCON 2 model in your computer so that you can use right away during the training session. I teach in the university, so I normally hope that all the students are get ready with the homework. So this is also a kind of homework. But I also know the reality that most of the case they are not ready with that. So that's up to you. And we expect your active participation and maximize the learning from this initiative. This is an opportunity for you to utilize this platform to ask as many questions as you want and to make you kind of professional in this tool, because we have the person who developed it as a resource person. This is really a golden opportunity for all of you. So try to harness as maximum capabilities as you can from our resource person, Dr. Nikos. Please join the full time to be eligible for the certificate. Before handing over to our research person, let me introduce him briefly. He has a long experience, CV, and expertise. I will try to brief him in a short paragraph. Dr. Nikos Iftimio, sorry if I mispronounced it, I'm apology for that. He's a consulting engineer with expertise in sediment management for storage reservoir and run-of-the-river hydropower schemes. He graduated in civil engineering and obtained master's degree in environmental protection and sustainable development from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece in 2004. He obtained his PhD in sediment transport in mountainous river from the Technical University of Munich. As a consultant, he was involved in sediment management studies and in the design of small and large hydropower projects. He has managed World Bank's global sediment management study and water resources projects. He has particularly interest in the reservoir sustainability as well as the impacts of climate change and sedimentation on the reliability of water supply and hydropower generation and the robust adaptation to non-stationary climate futures. He was responsible for development of the RESCON 2 software, and he is also the principal author of that. The documentation related to the software, as mentioned by Praveen Karki. With this very, very brief background, I would like to hand over this to Dr. Nikos. So please follow with him and wish you good luck to all the participants. Thank you. Nikos, now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Pandeyji, and so congratulations for the very good pronunciation of all the difficult Greek names. So starting with my last name and my university and the city where I come from. So I know it's difficult. So we Greeks have so some different changes than in the Latin alphabet. Well done. And good afternoon and good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. And I must say that I'm very happy and I feel honored to be invited to deliver this training event. I would like to say a huge thanks to the organizers and of course to Pravin Karki, who has also facilitated and supported the organization of this event, as well as the previous work that we did the previous years. Give me 1 second to share my screen. So can you see in full screen
Yes, we
mode?
can. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And so we have this 3 days long webinar and training event on the application of the reservoir conservation 2 model. This is within the context of managing sedimentation risks in hydropower projects, which of course for a country like Nepal, and which is located in the Himalayan region, of course sedimentation poses an important challenge and is a very important aspect that must be considered during the development of hydropower projects. I would like to point out that we see also this webinar as a very good opportunity to get reactions from the application of the RESCON 2 model. So I would like to encourage you to work as much as possible with the software and the model during the next 2 days. You see, I have my email address here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I would be very much interested to have your feedback from the practical examples that we will run during the next days, as well as from future application. So today we will talk about a short presentation of sedimentation issues in hydropower projects and potential ways to address them through sediment management. And the main focus will be on the description of the methodological approach of RESCON 2. And I will provide also a demonstration of the application of the model with focus on data requirements and model setup, ways to calibrate the model, as well as we can go through the results of this practical application and how the results can be interpreted. Of course, I look forward to an intensive discussion and questions from the participants. And I think so. For me, the most important thing the next 3 days is to have an interactive session where we will discuss topics, and jointly we will try to find solutions and answers. So to start with, first, you all know that actually we need reservoirs because they provide a regulation of the naturally variable river flows. Here we see, for instance, the over-year variability of annual flows, and the available storage in a reservoir provides the capability to regulate the incoming flows, providing a reliable, this is a very important word, firm water yield downstream of the reservoir for beneficial usage, which of course can be hydropower, but of course we have irrigation and water supply, as well as another important aspect is the flood protection that can be provided by reservoirs. Of course, it's not only the beneficial water uses, but we must consider that the reservoirs must provide also ecological flows downstream, as well as one part of the incoming flows will be spilled through the outlet structures, the spillways of the reservoir. And we have also some evaporation losses. Now, this actually very important function of the reservoirs, I mean, that means the regulation of the river flow variability, which can be either over year or seasonal or daily. So for instance, in daily peaking run-of-river hydropower schemes, depends on the available storage that we have in our reservoir. Of course, depends on the ambient hydrological conditions, which is the hydrologic variability, which usually is expressed by the standard deviation of the annual flows divided by the mean annual flow. This would be the coefficient of hydrologic variability, as well as by the required reliability for the firm water yield that will be supplied downstream. So we have these three important parameters: storage availability, incoming storage availability, incoming variability of incoming flows, and reliability requirements for firm water yield to be supplied for beneficial water uses. Now let's focus on the first parameter, so the storage availability. Reservoirs have a natural enemy, which is sedimentation. So here you see an extreme example of sedimentation. This is a reservoir in the USA, and this is the intake tower. And you can see that actually the sediment deposits have totally clogged the intake, have filled the reservoir. It cannot be used anymore. So let's see some historic features. So we all know that most of the reservoirs worldwide were constructed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. After this period, we have a significant drop of the number of new reservoirs commissioned. And when we see the cumulative storage that is available globally, we have this S-curve, and we can easily calculate the average age of the global reservoir fleet. So now we are talking that we can assess that the average age of reservoirs globally is around 50 to 55 years old. You can understand that these reservoirs have accumulated sediment the previous years of their operation. So this sediment has displaced the available storage volume, the water that can be used for beneficial uses, and as a result, it affects the performance of the reservoirs. If we want to see the big picture, so there are estimates that the global sedimentation ranges between 0.5% and 1% of the available reservoir storage every year. So now here the black line shows the curve that we saw earlier. This is the cumulative storage capacity that has been constructed starting from the beginning of the previous century up to today. So this is just indicative, that shows that we have a slower addition of new storage. The gray area shows actually the constructed capacity, and the yellow area shows the sedimentation based on an assumption of a mean annual storage loss rate of 1%. So that means that between the black line and the yellow area, we have the available remaining capacity, and as it develops over time. So now we see that the maximum value was approximately here in the 80s. And since then, you can see that the width of the gray area actually is reducing. So that means that the net storage, meaning the constructed capacity minus the storage loss due to sedimentation, is continuously decreasing due to sedimentation. We can estimate that we have an average storage loss of approximately 45 cubic kilometer per year. And this would correspond to losing 300 to 400 large dams annually. So we see that the peak storage, the net reservoir storage peaked in the beginning of 90s and was approximately 5,200 cubic square kilometer. And the current net reservoir storage is 4,600 cubic square kilometer. So we see that actually the available storage that we have is getting reduced over time. If we combine this with continuous population growth, continuous demand for water, which is driven by urbanization, for example, and new technologies, now if we estimate the per capita, that means the available storage for each person on our planet, this shows an even more severe decline over time. So that means that this is a very important aspect that we should consider during the design. And the key idea is that we should try to conserve planned reservoirs which are able to conserve their reservoir capacity, as well as in existing reservoirs, try to protect them against sedimentation. An older assessment regarding the cost for replacing the lost storage was done by Palmieri and other colleagues from World Bank back in 2003. And back then it was assessed that the cost of the annual sedimentation is approximately $13 billion US. Now, if we want to go to the impacts of sedimentation, first of all, we need to understand that there are different aspects and functions related with reservoirs that are affected by sedimentation. First, let's discuss about the environmental. And the most important is that we have an interruption of the sediment transport continuity in the river where the dam is constructed and the river connectivity. So by creating the reservoir, we reduce the flow velocity of the river within the reservoir. As a result, sediment drop out from the water column and remain in the reservoir. Actually, this is the definition of sedimentation. But this means that we create a sediment deficit downstream of the reservoir. Now the river will have an increased transport capacity, but it will be under supply limited conditions. So this is the so-called sediment hungry effect. So that means the river is able to transport sediment, but doesn't have the sediment. And in order to satisfy the sediment transport capacity, we have the phenomenon of downstream erosion. So that means the sediment will be scoured and the sediment transport capacity of the river after a few kilometers will be reached. This can cause important environmental consequences which affect the river morphology, the fish habitat, and can reach down to the coastal zone, creating coastal erosion. We have observed cases in Japan as well as in Europe where the coastal zone is eroded with a rate of a few meters every year. You can understand that this causes, of course, huge consequences. Then, of course, we have a very important economic impact driven by sedimentation and with the loss of the reservoir's active storage. And this is the reduction of the reliability for water supply and irrigation, as well as for storage hydropower production. We have the reduction of peaking or seasonal or long-term energy storage. In mountainous areas like Nepal or in Andes in South America, or in Alpic countries where we have large quartz content in the sediment that are created by the glaciers. So we have a significant risk related with the abrasion of generating equipment, as well as if the reservoir serves for flood protection purposes. We have a reduction of the flood surcharge volume, so that means reduction of the effect on flood retention. And the important aspect that we should also consider is that, of course, the sediment deposits will remain at the upper reaches of the reservoir, so causing the so-called deltaic sediment deposits, the sediment delta. And this might affect what will happen with the flood protection upstream of the reservoir. This is also one aspect that must be considered. It is a significant impact of sedimentation. And of course, another aspect is related with safety of dams and reservoirs. So we have, first of all, we discussed about the sediment hungry effect. So we have the structural, so this erosion downstream of dams might affect the structural stability of hydraulic structures such as stilling basins due to downstream scouring. We have additional sediment loads at dams and intake structures, which are considered, but sometimes it's difficult to assess how they will behave under earthquake conditions. This is something that should be considered. So we have sedimentation might cause a reduction of the spillway discharge capacity, as well as a very frequent threat and risk is clogging of intakes and outlet structures. For instance, if the bottom outlet embodied in the dam structure is not operated regularly, then usually it is clogged. And then this, of course, might affect dam safety, since bottom outlet is a very important hydraulic structure from this aspect. Now let's discuss a little bit. We all are experiencing different climate conditions than the ones we have been used to, the ones that we were raised. So we see that we have more frequent floods and longer droughts. So this is there is a consensus among the climate scientists that actually climate change causes an increase of the hydrologic variability. And so this is clearly, for instance, expressed in the climate, in the fourth assessment report, in the synthesis report, where it is mentioned that it is to expect increased precipitation intensity, and that means flood events and variability. And these are to project, this phenomenon is projected to increase the risk of flooding and drought in many areas. So that means we are expecting an increased hydrologic variability, which in the first slide we mentioned that this is another important parameter that affects the performance of reservoirs. Of course, we're expecting also changes in the variability of, in the availability of runoff. So this can be expressed, for example, by the mean annual runoff. And there, of course, one thing that we should acknowledge is that there is important uncertainty in the projections of the global circulation models. So this important uncertainty must be considered in any climate change risk assessment, since we have different opinions on how the mean annual runoff will develop in the future. Now let's see what is the cumulative impact, the combined effect of sedimentation and climate change. And here on this plot, don't know if you can see the cursor of my mouse. Perhaps let me put the pointer. So here on this graph, on the vertical axis, we have the firm yield expressed as a percent of the mean annual flow that can be provided by a reservoir. And on the horizontal axis, we have the available active against non-dimensionalized, expressed as a percent of the mean annual flow. So the blue line here shows a typical storage yield reliability curve, which here in this occasion, we consider that it represents the historic hydrologic variability. So that means that this curve shows what is the firm water yield that can be supplied by the reservoir for a specific reliability and a specific hydrologic variability, in that case, the historic hydrologic variability, for a given condition of the reservoir active storage. And now, because of sedimentation, we know that active storage is reduced continuously. If we move now in a new reservoir condition because of sedimentation, we see that actually we have a reduction of the firm water yield that can be supplied by the reservoir. So this can be considered to be the impact of sedimentation. On the other hand, we are talking that about climate change and increased hydrologic variability. So we know that we can anticipate increased hydrologic variability, more floods and longer droughts in the future. So here the red line represents again the storage yield reliability, but for an increased coefficient of hydrologic variability. At the same time, we can make an assessment that actually, so climate change will create an increase of the sediment loads in the river. For instance, in Himalayan countries, if we have a recession of a retreat of the glaciers, this will add additional sediment loads in the rivers. In Mediterranean countries like Greece, we are expecting drier conditions, which will increase the wildfire risk, which is a major parameter driving erosion in the catchment. So we can say that it is very likely that climate change will induce also an increase of the sediment loads. Now, if we consider the combined effect of climate change, increased sediment loads, and sedimentation, we see that the impact is much more severe than it would be without the climate change parameter. So this is an important aspect that should be considered, that it's not only sedimentation, but also the future hydrologic conditions most likely will cause more significant impacts of sedimentation, exactly because we will have more intense floods, higher sediment loads, and also so the demand will be increased. So this was nicely formulated in 2003 during the Third World Water Forum, Kyoto, where actually it was highlighted that in our century we will need to focus on sediment management, and the idea will be to convert the available reservoirs which are non-sustainable. We will need to take action in order to convey them to sustainable facilities. And of course, this applies also in the plant reservoirs, in the greenfield projects. We must learn from the mistakes we did in the past, and we must plan reservoirs that will be able to handle, to manage the incoming sediment in order to stabilize, in order to ensure that they can be managed sustainably. So now just a very brief overview of how this can be done. So we are talking about storage conservation or sediment management. And here we see the unsustainable paradigm. So that means here we have the incoming sediment. Because of the change of the hydraulic conditions within the reservoir, we have sedimentation, and the sediment releases are much slower than the incoming sediment yield. So that means the storage reservoir will be practically eliminated in the future. Of course, it's difficult to predict now. So, and this is what we will show how it can be done with RESCON. What is the lifetime of the reservoir? But the key idea is that this is something not that we should prevent, because we have the environmental impacts downstream. We lose the functionality of flow regulation over time due to sedimentation. And of course, there are the safety aspects that were mentioned. There are different strategies to sustain the reservoir storage. Just take the main grouping classification that has been reported of methods that have been developed in the past for management of sedimentation include, first of all, a reduction of the sediment yield arriving in the reservoir. So this can be achieved through measures on the upstream catchment, which might be nature-based solutions or structural measures, such as creation of upstream retention. It is possible to try to route sediment through the reservoir or around the reservoir. So this would be to minimize the deposition by altering the hydraulic operation of the reservoir, for example, through alteration of the operating water levels. And the other is general method is to allow sedimentation in the reservoir and then remove the deposits downstream or in upland disposal areas. So there are different methods. This is a classical classification that has been presented by Greg Morris. Here we see the reduction of the sediment yield, which can be, for instance, performed by soil erosion control and revegetation, or by creating additional sediment retention upstream of our reservoir. So we have also sediment routing techniques, for example, sediment bypass, where we try to divert part of the incoming sediment load around the reservoir, or sediment pass-through, for example, sluicing is a common strategy within this category, where we lower the water level in order to increase the reservoirs in the reservoir and to facilitate a lower sedimentation and to facilitate sediment passing through the reservoir. And finally, we have different deposit removal techniques. For example, we have dredging or hydrosuction, or there is hydraulic scouring, for example, empty flushing that can be used for the removal of sediment deposit. An important strategy is the adaptation. So that means we accept that we'll have sedimentation in our reservoir, and we will need to adapt to this situation. For example, here we can have modification of intakes or hydroturbines, for instance, to prevent or to minimize or to mitigate the abrasion risks. An aspect is to raise the dam in order to increase the volume. But we must understand that these are not sustainable solutions. Of course, usually it is a combination of different methods that is applicable in a reservoir, and it's important to highlight that it is always highly project and site specific and needs tailoring to the prevailing conditions in each reservoir, the selection of the optimum sediment management strategy. Just a few words on the global sediment management study, although this has been described by Pravin at the beginning of our workshop. So the previous years, the recently established hydropower development facility of World Bank's ESMAP conducted a global study in sediment management, which was funded by the Austrian government. And the objectives of this study were to improve practitioners' understanding of sedimentation impacts and to support the planning, implementation, and operation of effective and sustainable sediment management both in storage reservoirs and run-of-river hydropower plants. So this program had 5 programmatic activities. One of these was the development of technical analysis tools to support the identification of sedimentation risks and screening of sediment management alternatives. And one knowledge product of this program was the development of the new version of the model RESCON 2, so which actually it is the topic of our webinar these days. So without any delay, I would like to go into the objectives of the RESCON 2 analysis, which are to provide a screening of the state-of-the-art sediment management alternatives. So there is a wide palette of sediment management techniques. To rank the most promising for further detailed studies. And a very important aspect is to consider the value of intergenerational equity that is created by storage conservation. And finally, to provide a preliminary assessment of climate change related risks, combination with sedimentation, and an assessment of sediment management alternatives as an adaptation to climate change. So this work is based on, of course, on previous works. So we have the manual of the first version of RESCON. So it is a publication extending the life of reservoirs from World Bank Group, where George Annandale and Gregory Morris and Pravin Karki provided guidelines on sustainable sediment management, both for dams and run-of-river hydropower schemes. We have the classical textbook on reservoir sedimentation by Gregory Morris and Jiahua Han, and the publication, the book from George Annandale, Quenching the Thirst, where he presents so the impacts of sedimentation on reliable freshwater supply, and he presents the importance of reservoir sustainability. So we are talking about resources. Actually, within the Global Sediment Management Study, we established an international sediment management network called HydroSedinet. Here you can see the website, and the idea was to create a web-based platform freely available in the public domain, where so people involved in sediment management and reservoir sedimentation can be informed about activities of other colleagues on these topics. And the idea is to just to guide the traffic to existing activities and initiatives on this topic. In the website of this network, we have a section named Resources, which when you click on this, then here you can find research projects, tools, publications, and here you can find also the publications that were mentioned previously that provided the basis for the development of RESCON 2. An important aspect is that as every software and model, so there are limitations that must be well known from the beginning. And RESCON 2 is a computer program which is designed to be used in pre-feasibility studies when we have limited and readily available site-specific data. So that means that it is not a substitute for more detailed studies, which must be conducted with numerical and physical models during subsequent project development stages during feasibility studies or detailed design. And also it is very important to mention that sediment monitoring is very important for the design of any sediment management activity. So the numerical and physical modeling must be based on data collected carefully based on a well-designed sediment monitoring program by experienced colleagues that will go out on the field and will collect the necessary data. It is important to mention that it is based on empirical methods. It is not a numerical model, and sound engineering judgment is required for the interpretation of the results. So we mentioned briefly that there was a previous version of RESCON. Actually, the development of this model goes back in 2003, when the first version was published by World Bank with contributions from Alessandro Palmieri, George Annandale, Farid Shah, and other workers in the area of reservoir sedimentation. This was an Excel-based technical analysis tool, and was able to assess deposit removal techniques in a relative simplistic manner. In the meanwhile, until 2015, so RESCON was extensively applied worldwide, as well as the need for storage preservation immersed more on the surface. So as the reservoir global fit got older, actually, so the importance of reservoir sedimentation management became even more important, and as well as the climate change emerged as a controlling parameter in the future. So this prompted for a revision and upgrade of RESCON, and in 2017, the beta version of RESCON 2 was published with main innovation that also sediment routing techniques were included in the assessment. So apart from dredging and flushing and hydrosuction or tracking, so sluicing and bypass and density current venting could be assessed. Again, this was an Excel-based platform. We had a graphical user interface, but actually the computations were performed through a very long macro, which was developed in Excel. This version was developed by World Bank, which contracted Fichtner Consulting Engineers from Germany. And so in 2019, World Bank embarked in the Global Sediment Management Study, within which design guidelines and the technical toolkit was developed, and part of the technical toolkit was the new version of RESCON 2. Now this is a standalone program, so we moved away from Excel, which has been developed in Java, and we want to believe that it is much more user-friendly, and you will see that it is much faster to perform the computations. Now, one very important aspect is, okay, good all this, but what are the questions that can be answered by a RESCON 2 analysis? The first one is, what is the lifetime of the reservoir if we do not do anything? So if we do not apply any sediment management, how many years it will take until our reservoir is full with sediment? Another important aspect is sediment management technically feasible? We said that each reservoir has a unique character, and we need to tailor everything on the local prevailing conditions. So an important aspect is to assess the technical feasibility of sediment management alternatives, wherever, of course, this is necessary. What sediment management strategy can convert a reservoir from a non-sustainable to sustainable resource? It's important to understand that there are many parameters that affect the efficiency of the different sediment management alternatives. So it's different to perform sluicing with a duration of 1 month. It's different to perform sluicing with duration of 4 months. So the second case is more aggressive, so that means we can sustain a bigger part of our reservoir storage. Another point is the economic performance of the reservoir. And can sediment management improve the long-term economic performance of our reservoir. On one hand, we will have increased costs for reservoir sedimentation management. On the other hand, we will extend the reservoir lifetime. So how does this affect the long-term economic performance of our reservoirs? And finally, can sediment management increase the resilience of our facility to anticipated alterations of climate change? And all this under acknowledgement of the inherent uncertainty in the projections of climate future. So the capabilities of RESCON is that it is able to predict the time path, the development over time of sedimentation, as well as the spatial pattern. It performs a preliminary assessment of the development of the spatial pattern of reservoir sedimentation. That means how the deposits are allocated between active and inactive storage. We know that inactive storage or dead storage is the storage that it is below the minimum operating water level or the sea level of the lowest outlet of the reservoir. And active storage is the storage that can be used for regulation of incoming flows and that affects the firm water yield that can be supplied downstream. Apart from this, we evaluate the state-of-the-art sediment management alternatives. We talked earlier about catchment management to reduce sediment yield arriving at the reservoir, sediment routing, deposit removal, as well as combined strategies, which involve different techniques applied simultaneously, concurrently, or sequentially. It includes an economic appraisal whereby the firm water yield is assessed and it is valued, and as well as it considers the virtues of intergenerational equity and sustainable development through discounting concepts, so that are used for the assessment of the net present value of the future benefits, which give also a value on the future benefits today. We will discuss about this the coming days. And finally, as we mentioned, we have a climate change analysis where the vulnerability of the reservoir is assessed based on a climate stress test. We perform a resilience analysis where we evaluate the performance of the reservoir for different configurations, whereby configurations are defined by different sediment management alternatives and for different climate futures. And we have also an assessment of the adaptation to climate change, which sediment management alternative provides a robust adaptation to climate change. Just indicatively, the flowchart of the analysis is that we start with the reservoir geometrical condition at the beginning of every hydrological year. Based on the mean annual water inflow and the geometrical features of the reservoir, we can calculate the trap efficiency. Now, trap efficiency in the incoming mean annual sediment loads, sediment yield, give us the sediment deposition, which is the annual storage loss. That means we can identify what is the condition of the reservoir geometry at the end of the hydrological year. Now, please note that all these parameters here within the dashed line can be affected by sediment management. For example, catchment management measures can reduce the mean annual sediment yield that arrives at the reservoir. Sediment routing strategies, for example, sluicing, can reduce the reservoir trap efficiency, or deposit removal techniques like dredging or flushing can reduce the annual sediment deposits. After the first assessment, let's call it the physical performance of the reservoir, and based on the prevailing condition after sedimentation, we can calculate the water yield that can be supplied for a given reliability from the reservoir. This is also depends on the prevailing hydrologic variability, the coefficient of hydrologic variability. And from the water yield, we can try to monetize this water yield in order to calculate the annual revenues based on a user-specified unit rate of water yield. Of course, this happens for different water uses. So we have different unit rates for irrigation, for hydropower, and for different types of hydropower. If we have peaking, or if we have storage hydropower, or if we have run-of-river, pure run-of-river variable hydropower. We are considering also the annual costs, which are both for sediment management and the regular operation and maintenance costs. So based on the calculated annual revenues and the annual costs, we have the net present value for every year. This procedure is performed until our reservoir lifetime is reached. So that means when our reservoir gets full with sediment. And by aggregating the calculated annual net present values, we obtain the aggregate net present value, which expresses the long-term economic performance of our reservoir. We talked about an assessment of the spatial distribution of sediment deposits and the allocation between active and inactive storage. Here we are using a concept that was developed by Van Rijn, and it is based on schematization of reservoir geometry into compartments. First of all, we consider a simplifying pyramid-shaped geometry for the reservoir, which is defined by this basic triangle. Here we have the length of the reservoir, the normal operating water level, and the lowest point of the river cross-section at the dam axis. We fit a pyramid within this triangle that has the same gross storage as well as the distribution between active and inactive storage. And then we break this into compartments and we calculate the deposits in each compartment sequentially. So we calculate here the sediment inflow, the reservoir trap efficiency for this compartment. This gives us the sediment deposits. Sediment inflow minus sediment deposits gives us the sediment release to the next compartment. We repeat again the same calculation and so on. Having the volume of sediment deposits in each compartment and the key geometrical parameters of each compartment, we can calculate the height of sedimentation for every compartment. And if the deposits, the elevation, the invert level of the reservoir in every compartment is higher than the minimum operating water level, then we consider that the active storage is reduced. If the invert level after sedimentation in a compartment is below the minimum operating water level, then we have a reduction of the reservoir. An important aspect is that we make also a distinction between bed load and suspended load. Sorry, here this is a mistake. So in this slide, we are using the classical approaches of Brun and Churchill for the assessment of the trap efficiency of suspended load. Now here we see again the same graph with the classification of the available sediment management alternatives. And with yellow color, we see the techniques that can be evaluated by RESCON 2. And we see that actually we cover the biggest part of the developed sediment techniques. It's important to point out that it is not possible to assess adaptive strategies except from decommissioning of infrastructure. We will see this during the examples, how this can be assessed. And of course, it's important to evaluate different combined strategies involving multiple techniques. Here, just to give you an example, so of how catchment management it is assessed. So first of all, catchment management through different interventions, for example, through stabilization of steep slopes, through terracing, for example, or through afforestation of barren land, or through construction of check dams to control steep torrents and stabilize longitudinal slope. We can achieve a reduction of the sediment yield that arrives in the reservoir. Important parameters related with this are the timing for the implementation of these measures and, of course, the cost. Now let's see this graph here on the right. The blue straight line shows what would happen if we would not have implemented catchment management. On the horizontal axis, we have time, and the vertical axis shows the available active storage. So, of course, due to sedimentation, and this is a simplifying reservoir, that's why we have straight lines, no curved lines. So, due to sedimentation, if we, for the no action scenario, our reservoir storage would be eliminated after a finite time period. Now let's assume that at this point we implement catchment management measures. Sorry, this is difficult to read. I don't know if you can see this clear, but here this point here indicates the implementation of catchment management measures. It's important to acknowledge that for this strategy, usually there is a time lag between implementation and realization of the sediment yield reduction arriving at our reservoir. For example, if we through reforestation, usually it takes time for trees to grow, and so we might proceed with reforestation, say, next year, but the sediment yield will be significantly reduced in our reservoir, say, after 5 years when the forest has grown. So here we see when this is the time lag between implementation and realization of the impact of catchment management. And here we see that we have now a deviation from the no action scenario. So because of the reduced sediment inflow, now the sedimentation, the storage loss rate, so is now slower as we would expect. So that means we have an extension of the reservoir lifetime due to implementation of catchment management. Now, another thing that we see is that, again, we don't have a sustainable solution. So we have no action was non-sustainable, clearly. So our reservoir was eliminated after a finite period. With catchment management, we achieve here in this fictional, I point out, so and just indicative example, an extension of the reservoir lifetime, but still we have a non-sustainable reservoir. Now let's see a little bit the economics. We said that the firm water yield that can be supplied by the reservoir and which is actually responsible for the economic benefits from our reservoir depends on the storage availability. So here the blue bars, the blue line shows the annual benefits for the no action scenario. We see that we follow a different slope like the active storage. We have the dependency on between firm water yield and available active storage. The blue lines, the blue bars, they indicate the annual revenues from our reservoir for the catchment management scenario. So we see that at this point, when the sediment yield reduction is realized, so we have a deviation from the no action scenario. So these are the additional benefits that are created by catchment management. The red line shows the costs for the no action scenario. So here is the construction cost for our reservoir. These are the regular operation and maintenance costs. And here we have a decommissioning cost because our our reservoir is eliminated after few years of operation. Now, the same time with catchment management, we have additional costs which are realized the year of implementation of these measures. We have additional operational and maintenance costs due to usually maintenance costs for catchment management. And again, at the end, we have a decommissioning cost because again, our reservoir will be fully sedimentated. So here what we see is that we have additional benefits created by catchment management compared to the no action. We have additional costs created by catchment management. And the purpose of the RESCON 2 analysis is to compare actually the long-term economic performance, which can be calculated by discounting the annual operational, the annual benefits and the annual costs for different sediment management alternatives. Apart from this, it is possible to perform an optimization. For example, automatically it is possible to see what will happen if we have different times of implementation of the sediment management alternative. And this way, so it can be, this provides an indication about if it makes sense to implement a sediment management alternative from the very beginning or a bit later. Now we discussed about the economic appraisal. So we said that actually we depend on the active storage availability. We explained how this is calculated with the trap efficiency and the assessment of the annual sedimentation. The water yield, which is now partitioned into different water uses. So it is possible to specify if we have a multi-purpose facility.
Hi, Dr. Nikos.
Yeah.
Just sorry for interruption. Maybe after maybe some section, you may consider having a short break, depending on participants' interest. You can just decide accordingly after appropriate timing. Maybe 5 minutes break or so.
Yeah. Give me a few minutes to complete the economic appraisal, and then yeah.
Sure, that should be perfectly fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So based on the available active storage, we calculate the water yield, where we can consider also the different water uses if we have a multi-purpose facility, as well as the ecological flow demands to be released downstream of the dam. We assess the water yield losses related with sediment management, as well as evaporation. It's important to point out that sediment management is also associated with, for instance, activities like reservoir emptying for flushing or water level drawdown for sluicing. And as a result, this has also an impact on the water availability that affects the firm water yield that can be supplied downstream of the reservoir. So based on the calculated water yield, firm water yield and the respective water yield losses, we calculate the revenues and the revenue losses, the foregone revenues because of sediment management. So here we have the related costs, where we have the reservoir construction, the capital expenditures, as well as capital expenditures for sediment management. For example, if we want to retrofit an existing reservoir and dam, a new outlet for sediment management, for example, a new bottom outlet in order to perform flushing, usually this is very expensive. So this is an additional cost that should be considered in any sedimentation and sediment management analysis. We have the annual operation and maintenance costs, which are usually expressed as a % of the capital expenditures for the construction of the reservoir. We have additional costs due to abrasion. If we are in rivers, if we have projects in rivers carrying huge, big amounts of sediment, of course, abrasion is a huge impact. It has a huge impact on the economic performance. This relates strongly to the condition of the reservoir and hence the effectiveness of sediment management. And this is why, so this must be also introduced in the economic appraisal. And we have also the end of lifetime costs, where we have to decide what will happen when the reservoir is fully sedimentated. If there will be a cost for decommissioning, for example, for dam removal, or if we have a hydropower facility, if there is a possibility to continue using the power station, this time as a pure run-of-river facility, while previously, for example, it was used as a storage hydropower facility. And if this transition from one hydropower operational modus to another is associated with additional costs. Then we calculate the net annual benefits, where we have the annual, where the annual costs are deducted from the annual revenues. We are performing a discounting, where we have the possibility to perform this with different discounting concepts. And this helps also the assessment of the intergenerational equity that is created through extension of reservoir lifetime. And we can assess both the financial performance and the economic performance of our projects. So we have two basic questions that we want to answer with the economic appraisal of RESCON 2. And that is, first, if sediment management is a sound investment for an existing facility, for example, or for a greenfield project. And on the long term, what is the value that we give to the future benefits that are created through implementation of sediment management compared to what would happen if we would ignore the future generations and would say, okay, I'm only interested in what will happen in the next 20 or 30 years. And after 30 years, actually, I don't care. So we have implemented discounting concepts that enable assessment of the value of intergenerational equity that is created through sediment management and the extension of reservoir lifetime. So perhaps I think that it would be a good point here to have a short break, and then perhaps we can continue. So with the economic appraisal, I think 5 minutes would be okay, or 10 minutes. So I would suggest we resume in 10 minutes from now. We continue.
Yeah, sounds good, Nicholas.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay,
Also,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Nicholas, are we ready to go?
Yeah. So I'm good to
Okay.
go. Have
Sure,
a cup
sure.
of coffee. Have a cup of coffee with me. All is good. Can you see the screen?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
No.
Maybe we can go
Okay,
now.
thank you. Excellent. So we are continuing with the economic appraisal. And first we have, okay, the mean annual flow. So actually we want to have a breakdown of the mean annual flow. And first we must consider that if we see the balance, we have the ecological flow, the demand that must be released downstream. We discussed we have water losses that might be associated with sediment management. We have evaporation losses from our reservoirs. We have the firm water yield for uses that require flow regulation and which are storage dependent. And here we discriminate between over year or within year flow regulation. And these are usually uses for storage hydropower, for irrigation, and for a municipal and industrial water supply. We assess these firm water yields with empirical equations, for example, the Gould-Dinser approach or the Curia and Vogel approach, depending on if we have reservoir exhibiting over year carryover storage behavior or within a year reservoir behavior with frequent water releases over the spillway, or if we have a daily regulation of the incoming flows. In that case, we have daily peaking hydropower schemes. We have also water that is not regulated, so this is used for variable run-of-river hydropower production. And we have also one part that will be spilled over the spillway. So again, we show the curves that are used for the assessment. Here, this is just indicative. And of course, when we have the requirement for higher reliability of the provided of the water yield provided for beneficial services, then the curve goes lower than the respective functional relationship when we have lower reliability demand. And after calculating the firm water yield with empirical approaches, we multiply with a user-specified unit rate expressed in dollars per cubic meter. And this way we calculate the annual revenues. Now then we discussed also for the costs where we have capital expenditures for construction of reservoir, implementation of sediment management strategies. We have the regular annual operation and maintenance costs and for sediment management. These are also affected, the annual operation and maintenance costs, by the abrasion risk, which again depends on the condition of the reservoir, if it can act as a descender or not. And we have also the commissioning costs or costs for transition from one hydropower operational modus, for example, storage facility, to run-of-river operation. Then, depending on the discounting scheme, we have different development of the net present value. Here we see an example where we are applying flushing, and for this reason you see this white band of annual net present benefits. So the lower side shows the years where we have implementation of flushing. So that means we have additional water releases for flushing. This water cannot be used for beneficial services. So that means we have lower revenues. And the upper envelope, let's call it this way, is the years where we do not implement flushing. So we have more water for beneficial services. And the green lines, they show the calculated net present value. They are calculated for a fixed discount rate based on the classical exponential discounting. Here we are using a discount rate of 5%. In the upper graph, we see again the same annual revenues and cost for the example of flushing, but this time we are using a declining discount rate. You see that we start from 3% and we go to 1.5% on the long term. So here we use a period of 300 years. So now if we compare these two graphs, we will see that the aggregate, so that means actually it is the area below the green line, is larger than the aggregate net present value for the fixed discount rate. So actually what this graph here shows is that through sediment management, we achieve an extension of the reservoir lifetime, and at the same time, we give more value to the future benefits that are achieved through this conservation of reservoir storage than what we would give if we consider a fixed discount rate of so that means during our economic appraisal, we value more than the future benefits than if we would decide to perform the economic appraisal with the fixed discount rate. The difference of these two assessments, actually it is the value that we give to the intergenerational equity. So that means it is actually a decision of the planner to assess how the future benefits will be considered in the present through the discounting concept. And this is the reason why we have implemented different discounting schemes, concepts, in order to provide an indication of the value of intergenerational equity that is achieved through extension of reservoir lifetime with sediment management. Now, if we go to climate change analysis, this is a different plot of the graph that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. So here what we have is, again, the relationship between firm water yield, dimensionless firm water yield, for a given reliability, expressed as a percent of the mean annual flow, and the hydrologic variability. As the hydrologic variability increases, actually we have a drop of the reservoir of the firm water yield that can be supplied by the reservoir. So the different colors indicate different conditions of the reservoir. The green line is for a reservoir with a storage which is 2 times the mean annual flow, and the red line shows the relationship between firm water yield and hydrologic variability for a reservoir that it is 60% of the mean annual flow. So we can say that on the horizontal axis, we have the effect of climate change, the increase of hydrologic variability, more intense floods and longer droughts. And on the vertical axis, we have the effect of sedimentation. So we go from a large reservoir to a smaller reservoir. Now, if we assume that we will have both effects, so that means climate change and climate change and sedimentation, if this is our starting point, our reservoir is constructed with a storage capacity equal 2 times the mean annual flow. And after a few years, we have an increase of the hydrologic variability from 0.3 to 0.6. And at the same time, due to sedimentation, our storage drops from 2 times the mean annual flow to 60% the mean annual flow. So that means the effect on the firm water yield is going to be from, say, 98%. It will drop to 65% of the mean annual flow. Now, if we perform sediment management, assume that we can stabilize our reservoir storage at 50%. So that means from 2 times the mean annual flow, we will go to 1 time, to a storage capacity equal to the mean annual flow because of the implementation of sediment management. So that means that our firm water yield will drop now from 98% to 78%. What we can see is that sediment management can help reducing the impact of climate change through storage conservation on the firm water yield that can be supplied by the reservoir, and consequently on the economic performance of the reservoir. In other words, so sediment management can provide adaptation to climate change. So again, here, this is in form of a flow chart. We understand that climate change will affect the availability of water arriving at our reservoir through an increase or reduction of the mean annual runoff. It will increase the variability, and most likely it will increase the mean annual sediment yield that arrives into our reservoir. So of course, this affects the sedimentation development. And we explained earlier, so how this affects the combined effect of sedimentation and storage loss affects the supply of water for a given reliability. We can identify, and the economic performance of the infrastructure. Now we can identify 2 different, say, areas where adaptation can be applied. One, for instance, it is to adjust the power generation capacity. For example, if we anticipate a drier future, we can use less turbines, or we can, if we have an irrigation reservoir, we can improve the efficiency of irrigation network and other measures. And another adaptive group of adaptive strategies would be to manage the available reservoir storage even for future climate scenarios. This would imply the implementation of sediment management, which aims to increase or to sustain the storage capacity of the reservoir. Now, the climate change analysis incorporated into RESCON is based on projections of precipitation and temperature. There are different sources to obtain this information freely available in internet. We are using the World Bank's climate change knowledge portal, where it is possible to obtain the projections of the different global circulation models, the GCMs, for different emission scenarios and the projected anomalies, so the projected changes in the mean annual value for precipitation and temperature. During the samples that we will run, we will go into detail and we will see how we can obtain this information from the World Bank Climate Change Knowledge Portal. Here, this is just an example. Again, we will speak more in detail about this. But this graph here, it shows us the impact on the long-term economic performance of different changes of the mean annual runoff and the mean annual sediment yield for a specific reservoir. The blue points, they indicate the projections of the different models. here it's important to mention that the models deliver the changes of temperature and precipitation. So we need to convert this to assess the hydrologic response of our catchment to different climate conditions. In RESCON 2, this is possible either to be manually inserted by the user. So say that if we have an increase of temperature by 1.5% degrees Celsius and an increase of mean annual precipitation by 100 millimeters, so then the impact on the mean annual runoff, it's going to be an increase of 10% of the runoff. And the respective increase in the mean annual sediment yield is going to be a 20% increase of the mean annual sediment yield. So first option is either, if there is the respective modeling available, to insert manually this anticipated changes of the hydrologic response of the catchment to altered climate conditions, or to use empirical approaches for a preliminary first assessment of the impact of climate change to mean annual runoff and mean annual sediment yield. So here, the blue points, they show the anticipated change of mean annual runoff and sediment yield, and the colored bands, they show the relative impact on the long-term economic performance. In other words, for this scenario, for example, here, we don't have now which GCM it is, we can expect any reduction of the mean annual runoff by -17%, and a reduction of the mean annual sediment yield by 10%. So this lies on this band, which shows that this scenario will reduce the economic performance of the reservoir by 17%. So this is a way to plot the vulnerability of the reservoir to future climate change scenarios. During our examples, we will see how this can be assessed with RESCON 2. So just to provide a summary of what was presented earlier. So RESCON 2 provides an assessment of the reservoir sedimentation process with focus on the time path, the development over time, and the spatial pattern of sedimentation in order to assess the allocation of deposits in active and dead storage, and considers a partitioning between bed load and suspended load. It provides an evaluation of the performance of the state-of-the-art sediment management alternatives, including sediment yield reduction through catchment management measures, or sediment routing, or deposit removal techniques, as well as combined strategies. It incorporates in the economic appraisal declining discount rate concepts, which facilitate an assessment of the value of intergenerational equity created through storage conservation, and provides an assessment of sediment management as an adaptation strategy to climate change. An aspect that was not mentioned earlier is that this assessment for climate change considers the uncertainty related with the different climate change projections, and facilitates an evaluation of the sediment management alternative project configuration, which provides robust adaptation to climate change. So first, thank you very much for bearing with me. So it was a lot of talking from my side, and a little bit theoretical. So in the next steps and for the next hour of, or I would say 30 minutes or 35 minutes, I will try to show a practical application of RESCON in an example. And I hope that we'll have also time for questions and for a discussion after this. Just want to give a brief presentation of how RESCON can be applied, and the next 2 days we'll have a lot of time to go through this together and to see many different aspects. So now in the next few minutes I will not cover all aspects, just the basics, and the idea is that the next 6 hours, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we'll go through this together with practical examples. So the first questions that we will try to answer is what will happen if no sediment management is applied. So that means what is the lifetime of the reservoir? How will the trap efficiency develop over time? This is an important aspect if we want to retain sediment in our reservoir in order to prevent them from passing through our turbines, for example. So what is the net present value, the long-term economic performance of our reservoir for the no action scenario? And what are the risks associated with storage elimination? We'll answer similar questions for the sediment management combating techniques. Again, how does the reservoir lifetime can be extended through implementation of sediment management? How is the reservoir trap efficiency affected? And if there is a possibility to improve the economic and optimize the economic performance of the reservoir. And finally, we will see also what is the impact of climate change on the performance of the reservoir. So just a brief overview of the example that we will run. This is an existing reservoir. We will run this as a greenfield reservoir in order to see how sediment management could be evaluated at the very early beginning of the project development for this reservoir. So the studied reservoir had an initial capacity of approximately 150 million cubic meter, which was partitioned into 46 million for cubic meter for active storage and 102 million cubic meter for inactive storage. It is a multi-purpose facility which serves for irrigation as well as for daily peaking hydropower operation with an installed capacity of 180 megawatts and mean annual energy generation of 580 gigawatt hours per year. In addition, the reservoir is used for flood protection, for fishery, and for recreation. So we have an earthfill dam. So with a fixed overflow gated spillway. So the power station is at the top of the dam, so we don't have a diversion scheme. And the intake is an intake tower, whereby the bottom outlet is positioned very close to the intake tower and is discharged downstream next to the power station. So here we see a graphical plot of the development of the reservoir storage. So the flow is from right to the left, and the first graph on the left shows the initial condition of our reservoir, and the graph on the plot shows the condition of the reservoir after 25 years of operation. We see that this is a case of extreme sedimentation. We lost within 25 years of operation more than half of the active storage and the biggest part of the dead storage. So the incoming sediment comprised mostly sand and silt, and we had the formation of sediment delta. So for this reason, you see that the sedimentation occurs mainly on the upstream reaches of the reservoir, which the flow comes from the right to the left, as well as we have deposits close to the intake. The intake is located here, and here is our spillway. So here is a summary of the geometrical features. We don't go now into detail. And this is how, again, we don't need to go here into detail. We will see this in RESCON 2. So just an important parameter is that we have a length of approximately 3.5 kilometers of the reservoir. And in this picture, you can see the formation of the delta. So all this is sedimentated. And you understand so that the active storage in this area is practically lost. Here is a description of the incoming annual flows. We have a mean annual runoff of 2,950 million cubic meter per year, corresponding to a mean annual flow of 75 cubic meter per second. And we have a standard deviation of 450 million cubic meter. This is an important parameter in order to assess the coefficient of the annual coefficient of hydrologic variability, so which is approximately 0.2. So generally, this is considered to be a reservoir characterized by low hydrologic variability. The mean annual sediment yield is approximately 6.2 million tons per year and comprises mostly primarily silt and sands. So the bed load has been calculated as 8% of the total load. And generally we have a wet season which lasts from November till April, and the dry season has a duration of 7 months. So let me just so I hope you can see now the screen of RESCON. This is the first screen that we see when we open. I would like to point out that within the next weeks, so RESCON will be released. So this screen will be finalized. And so, of course, you will be informed about the website that will be used for the release of of the new version of the model. So after opening RESCON, we need to, here in that case, I will import that sample. Okay, here it is. Oh, it's right. And then, as you can see, we have two main, let's call it buttons here. The one is input, and the lower is the results. So here in the input, first of all, we need, of course, to give basic information for our example, for example, the project title, the author, the date, and the reservoir name, if we are having a greenfield or an existing reservoir, the catchment area, as well as we can give information on the location of the reservoir. And for reporting purposes, we can have also a screenshot of the map. So then we need to define our reservoir geometry. So we said that the initial gross storage capacity was 148 million cubic meter, and the initial active storage was 45 million cubic meter. The reservoir length was 3,500 meters. And we need also to, you remember we showed this basic triangle that we are using for fitting a pyramid-shaped geometry, compound pyramid-shaped geometry into our reservoir. And we need to define the full supply level and the minimum operating water level. And in addition to that, we need to define, to specify what is the riverbed elevation at the dam site. So we have now the lowest point of our triangle, the full supply level here, and the length of the reservoir. And here we can specify the number of the compartments that will be used for the schematization of our reservoir. So here we are trying with 6 compartments. If a measured storage elevation curve is available, we can use this here in order to compare with the automatically calculated storage elevation curve. Here we get some indicative plots that show how our reservoir geometry is implemented in the RESCON 2 analysis. For instance, here we have the longitudinal profile showing the elevation of the different compartments. We can have a plan view showing the average width of our compartments. Here, always on the right is the dam axis, and here are the reservoir headwaters. And we have also an automatically generated storage elevation curve, which is calculated based on the volumes and the elevations for the different compartments. As said, if we have measured storage elevation, we can use this here, this area, in order to compare the automatically calculated storage elevation curve with the measured, and this provides an indication of how well this automatic schematization fits the actual field conditions. Then the next step is to specify our hydrological conditions. So I think we had here 2,900. No, 400. This corresponds approximately to 75 cubic meter per second. And our hydrologic variability was 0.2. Sorry for this. And here, this is the calculated standard deviation. And based on this input data, as well as the statistical distribution of the annual flows, we get a first assessment of the flow duration curve of annual flows. Again, if this information is available at early project development phases, can be used for calculation of the model and to confirm how well we are approaching the actual conditions in our project site. Then we need to specify the mean annual temperature and the net evaporation. As you can see, so we have help tests, so next to each input field, so which provide basic description, as well as so what are the allowable values. We have on the fly data validations. If for some reason user specified input is erroneous or not acceptable, then the user is instantly informed what is the error and what are the allowable values. This is the specification of the annual flows arriving at the reservoirs. Then especially for the sediment routing techniques, we need to have an assessment of the seasonal variability of our hydrological regime. So we have two ways to specify this. First is a very rough assessment, just making a discrimination between wet and dry season. Here we say that the wet season has a duration of 4 months. And the flow is approximately 67% during this wet season of the mean annual flow. The second possibility is, if this information is available by the time of the RESCON 2 analysis, to specify the mean annual flows expressed as percent of the mean annual flow. And in that case, it's only necessary to specify the duration of the wet season. And the 4 months, for example, here with the 4 wettest month will be considered in order to assess the percent of mean annual flow occurring during wet season. Here, the next step is to
Just sorry for interruption, Nikos. There are, I think, a couple of questions in the chat box, and also someone is asking whether we can ask the question in between. Whenever you feel comfortable, maybe we may allow some time for the participants to ask questions, if any, then we can continue, if that is okay to you.
Look, I'm okay to also during the presentation, just most likely, so if we don't make it today, so with this demonstration, then we can continue, so say for half an hour tomorrow. For me, that's okay. And actually, I prefer this if we have this interactive, so during the presentation. Are you okay? So to have the questions now?
I see at least one there, and maybe some others, if they have the questions, perhaps they can ask it. One is from Suraj Sharma from the Midwest University. The question is sediment management, right? Routing, sluice, venting, change the orientation of outlet, as in Sanmexia, Dam China, upstream reservoir protection. Major challenge is the 21st century, Three Gorge Dam, and so on. Are major sediment problem reservoirs in the world? Taravela is major, Mangala also. I can't understand the question properly. Surajji, maybe can you spell out what the question is?
I think this is just the information. There's no questions. Maybe the model is very simple that Nicholas is going to explain. I think we can run by ourselves. First case, he can show some typical example or explanation is much better. Then all the participants can try by themselves. And tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we can have a discussion. That is my idea.
Thanks. And also Sanita was asking, Sanita was asking whether there is an opportunity to ask questions. Sanita, if you have any, you can please.
Yes, thank you, Vishnuji. Hi, everyone. I'm Sanita. I'm a PhD student at Utrecht University and EC mode. I was just wondering regarding this compartmentalization of the reservoirs. You showed that you can pick the number of compartments that that one can choose. Then can you also vary the width of the compartment based on how your reservoir bed might change depending on the steepness of the bed over your space?
Sanita, this is a good point. No, it's not possible. So the width of the compartments is automatically calculated. So here, if you try to combine these two plots, the longitudinal profile and the plan view, try to imagine that we have a combined pyramid. So this pyramid will have the volume that is specified by the user, the length that means the height of the pyramid that will be equal to the length of the reservoir, and then the width, it is calculated automatically in order to fit this pyramid shape to the available storage. The point that you are raising is a good one, because, for instance, if we have some complex geometries, then, of course, this simplification provides a deviation from the actual complex field conditions and the reservoir that we have. This could be, for instance, an idea for a future development. But for the time being, so we have this automatic assessment of the average width for each reservoir.
And as a follow-up to that, like you mentioned that you can put in your own storage elevation curve and also your own flow duration curve. But if there isn't enough flexibility for you to change parameters in the model, like how do you use that information? Because, for example, with being able to change the width of the compartments, I could see that as one way you could sort of calibrate this model to fit the storage elevation curve that you have on the field. So how do you see this feature being used where I compare my actual storage elevation with what this model is coming up with?
Here, Sunita, we must consider that, first of all, this is for a preliminary information. So for early project development phases, everything is based on empirical equations. So this is why I emphasized that this analysis should not be confused with the necessary numerical modeling, where of course we will have cross sections and detailed information on incoming daily flows and so on. And at the moment, as said, so it's not possible to change this automatic schematization. The idea to plot to add here, for example, so a storage elevation curve, it is for purposes of comparison. This is to provide an indication if the automatic schematization is okay, but what did I want to say? But as said, so at the moment, the only thing that can be changed is the number of compartments. On our experience, this does not have a significant impact on the results, unless we have a very complicated reservoir geometry. So that would mean so many different rivers, important rivers, coming into the same reservoir, which is rarely the case, I must admit. So
that is very good to know that you think that this is not a significant impact looking at the rivers that you have considered. But I think just as a potential feedback for the model, it would be nice if there was, like, even if you cannot change anything, it would be nice if the software itself gave some kind of uncertainty based on this difference between actual versus modeled parameters for both flow and also this reservoir volume.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and in the manual, we of course we think that reporting on the limitations, it's important. So for me, the most important is that everything, so that it is not a numerical model. So this must be clear. So we are using the Churchill trap efficiency for the assessment of the sedimentation. So it's not, the experience is very good with these classical approaches, but of course it is not a numerical model. So this must be, and we are using mean annual flow values. So I believe you understand that.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are two more questions here. Then we can maybe perhaps continue. One is whether it can take inputs at different lengths along the reservoir.
For sediment inflow, for example. So
yeah, I think so. That's the spirit of the question, I believe.
Yeah. No, this is not possible.
It's not possible at this moment.
We consider
All
that
right.
the sediment is arriving at the reservoir and water is arriving at the headquarters of the reservoir.
All right, thank you. And one more question
entrance.
here is, in case of multi-purpose projects, how water demand is fulfilled in hydropower and irrigation, or hydropower and water supply while managing sediment? This is the last question we have in the chat box. Thank you.
We will discuss shortly about this. I will show you how the input is done for this. And of course, during the examples, we can see more in detail how this can be done. But this was one of the important new features of the new version of RESCON. So previously, actually, this was not considered, but now in this version, we have the possibility to assess the multi-purpose reservoirs. And just so sneak preview here, we must specify the different water uses, the reliability, the respective demand. We have the different unit rates. So this is done here in economic appraisal and revenues. And we must also specify what is the priority of the water uses.
Okay. Thank you. And for other participants, if you have any query, please continue posting on the chat box and we will address them at appropriate time. Thank you, Nikos. Maybe you may continue, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So here we had the specification of the seasonal variability. We said we have two possibilities. One is with very rough description, wet, dry seasonality, season, and the other with mean monthly flows. And here we have the climate change input. Let's see this later, so not now. Let's see now for the historic climate, the conditions. So then we need to specify the sediment inflows arriving at our reservoir. So here we had a storage of 6.2 million tons per year. So bed load was 8%. And again, here an important parameter is to specify the in situ density of sediment deposits in our reservoir. This depends also on the gradation of our reservoir. Here, this 1.35 would be considered as a typical value. If our material is more sandy, then we can expect higher in situ bulk densities of sediment deposits. If our material is finer, then we can expect lower values. An important aspect is that because we are always talking about early project development phases, if the information on the mean annual sediment yield arriving in our reservoir is not available at that time, we have implemented an empirical equation, the BQART empirical equation, which is based on information that can be easily retrieved either from Google Earth, or there are global maps. This global map here indicates the geological classification of different basins around the world, which can be used for a rough first assessment of the mean annual sediment yield arriving in our reservoir. And here an important parameter is that we must specify, next step is to again specify the seasonal variability of sediment yield. Again, two possibilities, either through mean monthly sediment yields, which can be derived from a sediment rating curve. If this is not available, then we can again just specify roughly that 75% of our mean annual yield arrives during the wet season, which earlier was calculated during the specification of the hydrological input. Depending on the character of the river, if we have a riverbed if we have a sandbed river or a gravel bed river, so the duration of bed load transport can change also. So for example, in sandbed rivers, we have longer durations of bed load transport because the material is sand, can be easier in trade than in gravel bed rivers, where we have also this coarse armor layer protecting the riverbed, and during which we have usually bed load transport. With bed load, we mean the coarse material, gravel and boulders and coarse sand, which is transported in the vicinity of our riverbed. In gravel bed rivers, usually this duration of bed load transport is shorter. So within a few weeks, we have this where the armor layer is breaking and we have the transport of coarse material. Important parameter is that here we must specify the method, that the empirical approach that will be used for the assessment of the trap efficiency, which is the main parameter for the sedimentation storage development calculation. We have two possibilities, the classical approaches of Brun and of Churchill, and for each approach we have Churchill, for example, presented two curves. The one he named it after, we use the same annotation. So the one curve he named it local. So, and we use here the same annotation, and with this means that the reservoir comes from the sediment is originated from an unregulated catchment. if we use the upstream curve, this means that we have upstream reservoirs upstream, which trap one part and release, the sediment releases consist mostly of fine sediment. So here we must keep in mind that with local, we will have a higher trap efficiency. So that means we will have more sedimentation in our reservoir, predicted in our reservoir if we use, because this has also considers the presence of coarser particles, so sand and coarse silt in our sediment suspended load, while the upstream, for the same hydraulic conditions, residence time in our reservoir, we will have lower trap efficiencies. So here in the case that we are studying, we don't have any reservoirs upstream from our reservoir. So for that reason, we use the local, the curve that was named local by Churchill and delivers higher trap efficiencies. Again, here we can specify the impact of climate change on sediment yield. We will see this later. Then the next step sorry. So now, based on this information, we can see the results. So the first results. First, now we have specified our reservoir geometry and our hydrological, the mean annual runoff that arrives in the reservoir, the sediment yield that arrives in our reservoir, and the trap efficiency method that will be used for the assessment. And here in the results, we see that we have, first of all, in order to go to results, of course, we pressed here this button, results. And here we can see that now we can have the first assessment for the no action scenario. Okay, and we can see this for the historic climate. We didn't discuss about climate change. And we see that the first, we have here a dashboard logic. You can consider that the first line here provides a description of the physical performance of our reservoir. First of all, in this graph, this is for the no action, and then we have different graphs for other sediment management alternatives. So here we have the development of storage over time, over different years of operation, and then we have the trap efficiency and the sediment balance. So the first information that we get is that the lifetime will be 40 years. So that means that our storage will be eliminated after 40 years. Practically, it will be eliminated a bit earlier, after 36 or 37. So this has to do that at the end we will have a very small trap efficiency in our reservoir, and that the long-term storage capacity of our reservoir is 0%. So that means at the end we won't have any residual storage capacity in our reservoir. Now this plot shows here with, don't know how to describe this color. So let's say orange. So this is the active storage, the dead storage. Initially it was 102 million cubic meter. And here this line here shows the gross storage. It was initially 142 million cubic meter. So that means the difference between the upper line and this dividing line shows the availability of active storage in our reservoir. The first information that we get is that, okay, our dead storage, as we would expect, will be eliminated. So say after 30 years, it will be full. And the inactive storage will be slower reduced. I think we saw this also in the basic description of this sample, that after 25 of years, we had lost, I think, from approximately 80% of our active storage. And oh, let me check. So the dead storage was reduced from 102 to 23 million, and the active storage from 46 million to 20 million. So here what we see that after 25 years of operation, our calculated active storage is approximately 25 million cubic meter. This is a very good approximation compared to what has been measured. And at the same time, we see that we have a drop of the active storage, which initially was 46 million. It is here. And we see that after 25 years of operation, we have a significant lower active storage. So generally, we can see that we have a good approximation of the observed sedimentation procedure. And one important point that I would like to make here is that, look, in the past, when we were designing reservoirs, we were considering that, okay, first our active storage, our dead storage will be sedimentated, and then we will start observing impacts on our active storage, which is actually responsible for the economic performance of our reservoirs. But try to imagine, so now that we have seen this simplification of the reservoir, so this triangular or the pyramid-shaped reservoir, actually the concept of first losing the dead storage without having any impact on the active storage implies that our sediment deposits appear from the bottom of our reservoir and they go magically up. But actually in reality, we have, if here is our reservoir headwaters, we have the sediment inflow. One part, the coarse part, will stay in the upper reaches of the reservoir, and this will start reducing the active storage immediately. The finer part of our sediment inflow has lower trap efficiency, so it is characterized by lower settling velocity because it is finer. It can remain more in suspension even under altered hydraulic conditions in our reservoir, and will be transported in the deeper parts of the reservoir and will reduce our dead storage. What I want to say, a summary of this description, is that we can anticipate that sedimentation will start affecting our active storage, which is the main key parameter for the economic performance of the reservoir, from the early years of operation, from the first years of operation. And that if we consider that actually first all sediment magically will deposit in the active store, in the dead storage, and after 50 or 100 years, we will see sedimentation in our active storage, which is higher, then this is actually, it's not realistic. And this is one thing that we try to consider in the RESCON 2 analysis, that from the early year sedimentation might affect the active storage availability. And of course, this must be considered in any numerical modeling that will follow later. So enough with this graph. Let's go to the next one. Here we have a plot of the trap efficiency. And here we see that actually an important aspect is that in RESCON 2 analysis, it is considered that bed load, usually this is coarse sand and coarser material, gravel for instance, has a trap efficiency of 100%. This is a quite realistic approach. So, and here the light blue dots, they indicate the development of trap efficiency over time for the suspended load, which is actually the biggest part of the incoming sediment. We said that we had a sediment inflow of 6.2 million tons. And so 8% was coarse, transported as bed load, and 92% is fine. So these blue lines, they indicate the trap efficiency of fines transported in suspension. Here, what we see is that initially, when the storage was 142 million cubic meter, the trap efficiency was close to 95%. So that means 95% of the incoming sediment is retained in the reservoir. But now where we have a trap efficiency of approximately, storage of approximately 45 million, the trap efficiency has dropped to 85%. So we have a reduction of the trap efficiency. That means that more material remains in suspension and is released downstream. On one hand, this is beneficial from the environmental point of view, because we have a lower sediment, a smaller sediment deficit. Remember the sediment hungry effect, but of course this impact is very small. So because we still retain 85% of the incoming sediment. On the other hand, we have an increase of the amount of sediment passing through the turbines. So that means that this might cause, or that this might increase the risk for abrasion of our turbines. The key concept that I want you to keep here from this graph is that actually, as sedimentation progresses, the trap efficiency drops. The reason for this is that we have a smaller wet cross-section. So that means the same flow passes through a smaller cross-section. We have higher flow velocities. So that means more turbulence, more material remains in suspension, lower trap efficiency. And the result is that we have bigger amounts passing through our reservoir, through our power intake, and as a result passing through the equipment. So this is the key information that we can obtain from this graph. And this is related with the next graph, where we see the sediment balance. Here, the orange bars, they show the observed sedimentation, how it develops over time, and the light blue shows the sediment releases. The blue line shows the sediment inflow. So please note that this is expressed in million cubic meter. We specified the sediment inflow in million tons per year, which when divided with the bulk density of 1.35, we have this sediment inflow of approximately 4.5 million cubic meter. So now, as the reservoir trap efficiency drops, exactly because of sedimentation, so the amount of annual sediment deposits is reduced. We have this curve, and the amount of sediment released downstream, either over the spillway or through the power intake, is also increased. So I spend a lot of time here in this description because actually this is also the basis. We will see similar graphs also for all other catchment management, sediment management alternatives. Shall we perhaps go through the questions or at the end?
Yeah, Nikos, there are a couple of questions. If you are okay, maybe we can take them and then continue.
Yeah.
Will that be okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. First question is about what about the hydraulics phenomenon pattern after compartment divide in top set bed, fore set bed, and bottom set bed in reservoir? Will there be any changes in hydraulics and how they will be taken care in the model? That's the first question.
So I must phenomenon after compartment divide in top set bed for and bottom set. I must say that I do not understand the question clearly. The hydraulics phenomenon pattern after
Surajji, can you explain it, please? What the question is? Suraj Sharma, if you are still around.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. Could you please explain the question?
Sir, I want to know the hydraulics and the sediment phenomena that occurs when the sediment is deposited along the bed of the reservoirs upstream of the dam.
You mean upstream of the reservoir?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, this is an aspect that is not considered. So generally, this is more detailed, must be evaluated with numerical modeling, where we have also the river cross sections upstream of the reservoir, and we have also the backwater calculations to see what is the exact impact of the impoundment on the upstream river reaches. So in RESCON, the upstream sedimentation and the upstream flooding cannot be considered. There have been studies that show that up to 5 to 10% can remain in upstream river reaches. So, but this is a very rough assessment. As said, this would require additional numerical modeling, which is usually done in later project development phases.
All right, thank you. One more question is a simple one, maybe I can answer myself. Are we implementing this kind of learning to other hydropower projects in Nepal? I think it depends on the user, right? If they want, they can. But I'm wondering, it's not yet public, right, this tool, when we are planning to release it? Any idea, Dr. Nikos?
I hope that latest within the next 10 days it will be released. So to be honest, I want to see this out.
Okay.
It's been really a long process, and so now we are really just finalizing, doing some cosmetics. You saw the first page is the first screen needs some work, so we expect that within the next few days it will be released.
Okay, so it will be in public domain and without cost, or the cost will get involved for the users?
No, it will be freely available.
Okay.
And so if anybody has further questions, you have my email, you can reach out to me and problem.
Thank you. We are lucky enough to have the version even before releasing it. Thank you so much to you and the team. There's one more question. Due to different sediment management techniques, there may be some other unwanted impacts. For example, impact on the ecology, changes in ecology in nearby area. So in this context, considering those aspects as well, which sediment management technique is more effective? Do we have any research on that line, or any literature to refer? Any suggestion on that?
Very good question. So this is an important, for example, flushing can create a sediment pulse that might have adverse environmental impacts downstream. So this is why it needs very good planning, especially the planning operation or the flushing operation or dredging. There have been, there is a lot of work done on this mitigation of or planning of, let's call it this way, environmentally friendly or environmentally adopted flushing operations. For example, in Switzerland and in France, there is a lot of work that has been conducted. Here in RESCON, this would not be implemented, although indirectly you can see what is the amount that will be delivered downstream during, for example, one flushing event. And this can provide the first basis for a very early assessment. On the other hand, what we have in RESCON is, we call this environmental appraisal. So here you see that we have the different sediment management alternatives, if they are, and if it is a non-sustainable or sustainable solution. First, the user must perform the analysis, and then he can see if it is a non-sustainable or sustainable. And then here we have the different possible impacts. So, for example, on natural habitats, on human uses. For example, if say that we have the intake for water purification plant downstream of our reservoir, and we implement flushing or dredging. That means that few days our water treatment plant would need to be out of operation because of the high concentrations, or it would require additional costs for the water treatment. So this could be a possible impact on human uses. So resettlement usually we don't have with impact with sediment management unless we have disposal on upland disposal areas. Cultural assets, indigenous peoples, transboundary impacts. These are classical classification of possible impacts, environmental and social impacts from sediment management. So here the user, what we can do is we can implement a rating of the anticipated impacts. So for instance, if we have no impact or potential benefits, then we must use the rating 1. If we have significant impacts, then we must use the rating 4. And for example, if we use here 4, because we have, so say that we don't implement any sediment management, because now we saw the no action scenario. So we will have the sediment starvation conditions downstream. So this will affect the fish habitat downstream because we will have an armoring of the riverbed. So this might have a significant impact on natural habitats. In that case, we must specify a significant impact, say we put 4. Then we don't have impact on human uses, but say that because of the erosion downstream, a cultural asset might be endangered because we will have the downstream erosion because of the sediment starvation conditions. Then we put here 3. So you see that then we find what is the sum of these ratings that we had put, and we classify the total environmental and social impacts. So we are at policy level D. So we have a significant impact. The reason is because we have at least 1/4, which you see here, or otherwise the sum would be more of 16. This is the criteria for assessment of the safeguard policy to be used later in an environmental and social impact assessment. Now, if we go to results, and we go to no action, we see that here the D policy level that was evaluated based on the specified ratings for the different impacts is plotted here. We see also that we have a non-sustainable reservoir, and here is an explanation why the reservoir is non-sustainable. So, and the same can be done also for different sediment management alternatives. I know I spoke a lot on this question, but this is a very good point. And the idea is that all this actually I would say them anyway later. So actually we just rearranging the
all right.
presentation.
There are a couple of more questions, but I don't know, maybe you can continue with this one. And if we can handle at the end of the session, we can. In the worst case, we will communicate these questions to you. You can just prepare a response and maybe circulate tomorrow. Depending upon your planned contents, we will see at the end. Will that be okay?
Yeah, of course.
Sure, thank you. Please continue.
Okay. Then we specified geometry, hydrology, sediment. Before we go to sediment management, specification of sediment management alternatives, we must specify parameters for the economic appraisal. We saw earlier the results for the physical performance. Here we need to specify parameters related to costs and parameters related to revenues. We said that we had construction costs. Here we provide some guidance if we don't know what will be, because we are always talking about early project development phases. We don't have a cost assessment at this phase. Usually we do this based on a rough estimate of specific cost. If we have a hydropower facility, then we can use a specific cost of expressed in million US dollars per megawatt. And if we don't have hydropower and it is a reservoir that will be used for irrigation and water supply, so that means no hydropower, then we must use the unit rate US dollars per cubic meter. In that case, we're evaluating a hydropower scheme. And if we don't know what would be a plausible range of specific costs, then here we're providing some guidance and reference to either to the manual or other publications that could support having a preliminary estimate of the costs. Then same applies also for the operation and maintenance costs. They are expressed as % of CapEx. And here we must select what will happen at the end if we let our reservoir get sedimentated. So that means if we don't, it is get fully siltated. So here we have two scenarios. The one is that it will be decommissioned. This might come at a cost if we need to take protection measures because we don't want to have an uncontrolled overflow over an abandoned reservoir, or we can select that it will be used as a runoff river scheme. In that case, it might be necessary to, for instance, implement a descender. So this would come at, and this transition from storage to runoff river operation might require an additional cost. Here we are assuming that it will be decommissioned, and the cost for decommissioning will be approximately $50 million. Another parameter is that we said that we are characterizing the reservoirs between, classifying the reservoirs between, or the solutions between sustainable and non-sustainable. Here we have implemented a criterion for the characterization of classification of reservoirs. And we assume that a reservoir is non-sustainable if it loses more than 95% of the initial storage within the first 300 years of operation. So there is no classical definition for this. For this reason, we have, this is up to the user actually to specify how a reservoir, when a reservoir is non-sustainable and when it is sustainable. So, and this can be done through this parameter. Then we have the discounting concept that will be used for the assessment of the net present value. So here we see that we have different discounting concepts. For example, here we have the exponential, and if we use the Ramsey or the Green Book, you see that we have this stepwise drop. But this is for the economic appraisal. And on the other hand, you see that we have a fixed discount rate here, which is used to assess if the implementation of sediment management is a sound investment idea. So this depends on the implementing authority or the investor, the selection of this discount rate. And as you see, the economic discount rate lies higher. So what we do actually is that we give more value to the future benefits through this discounting concept than with the financial discount rate. So with the financial discount rate, we are interested to see if the investment will have a payback within a given period of time. So with the economic analysis appraisal, we are trying to specify through the selection of this parameter the value that we give in the benefits that are generated through the extension of the reservoir lifetime compared to the no action scenario. Then another possibility is to specify what are the forced downtimes for the reservoir. This would be the case if we would have a sediment guided operation. So say that we see that we have severe abrasion within few hours because of very high concentration of sediment in our power water. So if say that it's 10,000 ppm. So then the user can specify, okay, so for 2 weeks a year or 1 day a year, I will not operate my power plant in order to prevent this excessive abrasion of my equipment, which actually is not economical. So the economical cost of this excessive abrasion is higher than the cost of the energy that I do not produce. And so this is the definition of the sediment guided operation. We can specify a threshold for concentrations where actually we will not operate our power plant in order to reduce the losses related with abrasion of our equipment. Finally, a very important new feature of the new version of RESCON is that we have an assessment of abrasion risks. This is done with the Nozaki method, which is widely accepted for this purpose. Of course, recently we have more models that have been developed, but we apply the Nozaki method because this can be digitized and implemented for an early project development assessment. And here, so an important, the assessment of abrasion risk is performed for different conditions of reservoir trap efficiency. We saw that this drops over time, and sedimentation. So this defines the amount of sediment passing through into our reservoir and through our intake and turbine. And so here we must specify some characteristic features for our grain size. So the hardness and the roundness and the turbine material and type of material, and to give economic parameters. So for the cost for repair of the damaged equipment. So again, we will discuss about this during the samples that will run, how to specify. But if we see here, we see that these are the results of the assessment. And we see that if our reservoir trap efficiency is 100%, so that means all the incoming sediment remains into our reservoir. So the water passing through our turbines does not convey sediment. So that means that we don't expect, of course, any abrasion, and we don't have any additional costs for repair of abrasion of the wear of generating equipment. Now, if we have trap efficiency drops to 75% because of sedimentation, then 25% of the incoming sediment will go through our turbines. In that case, we can expect an increase of 0.16% of the capex because of costs for repair of worn equipment, and a small drop of the mean annual energy generation of 0.13%. And we do the same assessment for different conditions of our reservoir. So if we copy these values, then these are transported here in this table, and they are incorporated in the economic appraisal. So with time, I think that we should continue tomorrow with this. What do you think? So with the data specification, the important actually we have this that I would like to describe tomorrow, 5 or 10 minutes. And then through the sediment management alternatives, we will go together during our exercise. Is this okay with you, or would you like me to finalize here also with this, the input for the economic appraisal now?
No, I think it's almost 9. All the participant and also you should be tired by this time because it's a thorough 3-hour session. So if it is okay, we can take a couple of questions that is in the chat box, and then maybe we'll continue tomorrow. And also a couple of questions is one that's interesting to me is there any limitation on the size of the reservoir to get better result of the model? Any suggestion on that?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yes, there are limitations. First of all, we must consider that there is an underlying algorithm here. First of all, if we have a very small reservoir, then you understand that generally this can bring computational algorithm to its limits. An important aspect is that, of course, so this is one limitation, I would say. So I would not apply this for very small reservoirs, say.
All right.
Or it depends on what everybody defines as a reservoir. So it might be a very small head pump, say with few thousands cubic meter. This would be at the limit, but I think that could be managed, but to be honest, would be at the limits.
Right.
This is planned for storage reservoirs and peaking hydropower schemes. Another limitation related to your question would be the division between gross storage and active storage. And so that means we must consider that actually this is based on this pyramid-shaped simplification of the reservoir geometry. So that means that there is a given ratio between dead storage and active storage, and the depth of active storage and dead storage. What I want to say, if somebody defines a very deep dead storage, so say that the minimum operating water level is very close to the full supply level, and at the same time specifies a very small dead storage capacity compared to the active storage capacity, this again is a conflict. So we have a very deep, so a big part of this pyramid actually is considered to be dead storage, and at the same time somebody says that okay, this has a storage capacity of 10 cubic meter and the active storage is 1000 cubic meter. So this is an important limitation that cannot be incorporated in this schematization. So somehow, of course, the specification must make of active storage and dead storage must be geometrically rational, to put it this way.
Thank you. I think there are 6 more questions, but that I will communicate to you personally, and you may prepare a response, and then we can circulate tomorrow because we are running out of time. So one thing is, do you have any suggestions for the exercise for tomorrow? There was one question. Do we use the same question, same case for tomorrow, or we'll have a new example with focus on South Asia? So if you have any suggestion, you can provide now. And also, do you want the participant to work on something or a kind of homework before they come to the tomorrow session? If any, you can suggest on, then we can conclude.
So look, to be honest, I see this also as part of the testing. So as said, this is not the final version. In the meanwhile, we have improved this version, so the one that will be released official. Try to break this, so really, and come back to me and tell me look, I tried, I gave this example, these numbers, and actually the computer started smoking. So I see this that this is an interesting, very interesting feedback for me. For tomorrow, I don't have to give you now specific examples to run, but we will do this tomorrow. What I would like to do is to give you, to present in slides, so the basic input. And what I want you to do is to insert this input on your own in the model, to set up the model, and then we do the calculation. I will send before the training also a file in case somebody goes wrong. Somebody can start over without putting everything from the beginning. But for the time, no, I don't have something to share. Let us do this together and having as a backup plan. So the project file that can be used, so in order to resume if something breaks down, if there are problems during the exercise.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a clear message for tomorrow to the participants. You may try to maybe install the software and try to dig on this demonstrated example, and also come back with other questions if any. And also, like tomorrow you mentioned, you will work on model setup with a set of input provided to you. So for that, whatever preparation you require, depending upon the, varying level of expertise you have, you can prepare accordingly to make the tomorrow's session effective. I really thank you all the participants primarily, because you are the main person. Of course, resource person is required, but without participation, resource person will not have any role. So I really thank you all on behalf of organizers to your active participation, because there were a lot of queries posted in the chat box to make the session very interactive. I personally really enjoyed it. Thank you, Nikos, for making your time available and making a very thorough and detailed presentation on various aspects of the model. It was very useful to learn it. We'll continue tomorrow. It was a long 3-hour and thorough session. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward meeting you tomorrow at the same time. Have a good time, everybody.
Thank you very much, and good night. And tomorrow it will be a little bit more interesting than today, so more exercise.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nicholas. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.